You're building an exciting game on Roblox and you want to launch a big in-game event, maybe a boss battle, a race, a special challenge. But there's one problem: how do your players know it's going to start? If you don't keep building anticipation and keep them engaged, the excitement's going to fade and pretty soon they're going to leave. Today we're going to create a countdown system that's going to help you keep your players engaged and ensure that you don't lose their interest. Let's get started. First of all, I'm going to assume that you understand object-oriented programming. If you don't, you can check out one of my previous videos. There's a link in the description below and one on the video right now. So the first thing we're going to do is create a module script inside a replicated storage. And we're going to call this timer. The reason we'll put this in replicated storage is because we want to be able to use this on the server side or on the client side. Now, because we're creating a class, we're going to want to set the index property, and then we create a new function. It allows the caller to pass in the minutes, the seconds, and a callback. This callback is going to be a function that the user can pass in so they can execute any code that they want to run on each iteration of the countdown. You'll see what I mean in a couple of seconds. So first we set our total time. This takes the minutes, times it by 60, because that's how many seconds there are in a minute, plus the result of that gets the seconds added to it. The ultimate result of this is the total time, and it's the total time represented in seconds. We'll convert it into seconds so it's easier to manage the logic. Next we set our meta table, and in here we set the total time. That's going to be equal to the total time we've set at the top. Then we set the current time, so another way of saying that is the starting time as well, which is also equal to the total time to start off with. And then we have a running property, and this running property is going to allow us to stop a timer before it's finished. And we finally pass the meta table the timer itself. So after new's been called, the player will have a new instance of a timer, but currently we don't have any functions in there. So we provide the start function, and this is going to start our timer. So the first thing that we need to do is set the running property to true. Then we want to create a loop that iterates every second. So here what we're saying is, while the property running is true, and while the current time is greater than -1, we're going to wait for a second, and then we're going to repeat the task. Once one of these, whether that's running or the current time, becomes equal or less than -1, then it'll break out of this loop. Currently, we've got an infinite loop, so let's fix that, and we do that by calling self.currentTime minus equal 1. So it's going to reduce the current time by 1 on every loop. Now I've also asked the user to put a callback in here. So I want to call the callback, but when I do so, I want to pass in the time remaining. So for us to get the time remaining, let's create a private function, and we'll call this getTime in minutes and seconds. This is going to return a table with a minutes and seconds property. This is something that the user will then be able to use, so then they can emit events down to the client. So from the current time, remember in the timer.new, we take the minutes, times it by 60, then add the seconds. We're kind of doing the reverse in here. We're taking the current time, dividing it by 60, using math.floor, and setting the result to a mins property. That's just me being really lazy. I could have put minutes. But I'm also going to do the same with seconds. And here we take the current time value and find the remainder, which is what this is. This is a modulus operator. And the remainder of 60 from that current time gives us the number of seconds that's left. Then finally, we're going to return a table containing the minutes and seconds. Then what we need to do is create a time remaining variable and call the getTime in minutes and seconds function, passing in the current time. So that's our start function done. We also want the ability to stop the timer. So here we're going to create a stop function, and this one's really simple. All it's going to do is call self.running and set that to false. So if the timer's running at this point and stop gets called, the timer will just break out of what it's currently doing. Now I could call this directly from a script in server script service, but I'm going to want to use this to make a countdown manager. So what I'm first going to do Just to check that this is working, I'm going to create a countdown manager. And in here, I'm going to create a function called start countdown. In the start countdown function, I'm going to call the timer. So at the top, we need to require the timer. And the way we do that, we need to call replicated storage, because that's where the timer has been placed. And then we need to require our timer. So now we've got our timer, we can create a new instance of it. And in here, I'm going to pass the amount of minutes we want, the amount of seconds, and then I pass in our callback. So remember, our callback gets the remaining time passed into it. And using that, we can now execute any function that we want using that remaining time. So in this case, I'm just going to print the seconds to the console. And I can also print the remaining minutes as well, if I put it in the right place. Cool. Because this is a module script, I'm going to need a normal script. And from here, I'm calling a module script. I could have called the timer directly from here, but I wanted you to see what it looks like, and so we can build it up stage by stage so it's easier to understand. So if I open up the output, don't know what they're there for, I think it's a Roblox thing, we'll soon see. And if I press play, nothing happens. Let's see why that is. So if I come to the script, put a breakpoint there and I run it, it goes in, create new, and I forgot to start the timer. So I've created a new instance of it, but I didn't start it. So if I come under here and call start, I can come back here, remove that breakpoint, press play again, and I get an error. Index nil with start, which means the error is going to be in the timer script, and I forgot to return self at the end of this. So after those two little mess ups, we'll open up output, and we can see here we've got 5 minutes 10 seconds, and it's counting down. And when we get to 0, it's got 4 minutes 59, 58. So that's working well. We can close the timer now, and let's look at the countdown manager. So here we get our new instance of the timer, we start it, and remember, the code doesn't continue past here until the countdown's finished. So what I want to do here is when the countdown's finished, is send a message to all clients that the countdown's finished. So we'll say, message all clients, countdown finished. Now in this function, because I'm going to want to put this value on everyone's screen, I'm also going to want to message all clients with the remaining time. So what we'll do, we'll call this one countdown in progress. And I think it also makes sense to have a countdown started in here as well. So we've got 3 separate places where we're going to call all the clients. So this is going to be repeated code. So instead of repeating code, what I'm going to do is create a function, and we can call that all clients message. This is going to be a generic function that's called by each one of these places, so it can send a message out to the clients. But for us to do this, we're going to need to have an event. I'm going to create that event in replicated storage. I'm going to call it the countdown remote event, and then I'll reference that at the top of the script. Then in here, I'm going to call the event and the fire all clients method, passing in the event type and any particular data that I want to send down to the client. Now I haven't created anything in the client that's going to pick this up yet. We'll do that in a second. But in my head, I know what's going to happen is I want a number of events to take place. Like we said, we've got a countdown started, a countdown in progress, and a countdown finished. So we're going to have something in the client that is going to pick up each one of these. So all I have to do now is add the all clients message method and pass in countdown started. Then after the timer's finished running, I can send the countdown finished event, and then inside my callback, I can send down the countdown in progress event, and this countdown in progress event sends down a table with it with the remaining time. So let's add a local script in starter GUI. And the first thing we can do is reference the replicated storage. Now we've got this, we want to access the countdown remote event, then connect to the on-client event property. In here, we need to pass in a function. And what I'm going to do is create a function called onGameStateChanged event. And this is going to pick up every event that comes from our countdown remote event. And now in here, just to test that it's working, I'm going to print the time that's been sent. But before I do that, let me look in the countdown manager. Yes, so I was checking to make sure that I'd removed the print function from in here. So if we run the game, open the output, we can see here that our local script is receiving a time object. Click on the local script, and that's 5 minutes 9 seconds. If we come down to here, open up the time object, and that's 4 minutes 58 seconds. So that's working. We're receiving our events from our countdown manager. Next, what I want to do is add a new screen GUI so the value can be shown up here. So I've just pasted this in. We've got a screens GUI. We've got a top frame, so that sits at the top of the screen. Then we've got a UI list layout, which I probably don't need, so I'll get rid of that. Seems I was using this list layout just to center the text. There's an easier way to do that, but I'll leave that as it is. We've got this intermission text frame. In there, I've got another frame which contains the text label and text stroke. Got a configuration in there which I don't need for this. So this tutorial's come from one of my older games which I created. I found it really useful to have a timer, so this screen GUI has come in from that. What I can do now is drag the local script into the top frame, and let's go back to the local script. I want to reference the text frame and the text labels at the top of the script, so then I'm going to have access to them throughout the rest of this script. Now if we look back at our countdown manager, we've got 3 different events that we want to handle. Countdown started, countdown in progress, and countdown finished. So these are being passed in. If we look at the client, we look at the all client, and we look at the all client's message, we can see that's the event type. So that's the first piece of data that's come down. Let's get rid of that once again. That's something that came from my old game. We'll get rid of the print function and replace that with a countdown started event handler. So we're just saying if the event that we receive is countdown started, and then we're going to do the same for countdown in progress. And finally, we want an event to handle the countdown finished. So all these three statements are only going to update the text which we're showing to the player. And once again, like we did last time, because we're going to have the same logic more than once, we're going to create a function for that, and we'll call that handle message update. We're going to pass the text into it, and we're also going to say whether the text labels are visible or not. Start off by getting the intermission text label and assign the text to the text property of that. Then next, so we've targeted this top one here, and next we're targeting the stroke. The stroke is just like the black background, the black outline. And finally, we're going to say whether we want this text visible or not. Before we add anything else, there's one more thing I need to add. And this is a constant. It's going to be our next race message. And it's just simply going to say next race. So when we receive the countdown started event, we can call handle message update, pass in the message that we want it to show, and set it to true. So that means these 2 text properties are going to be set to next race, but nothing else. And it's going to be marked as visible. Then we call handle message update again when it's the countdown in progress, but this time we're passing the next race message, and then we're concatenating the number of seconds left. Now I'm only putting seconds here, just so we can see the timer taking place. If you wanted to use minutes as well, it'll work perfectly fine. That's what we saw with the print message. And then the final one is the countdown finished, which calls the same method again, and this time it sets the text properties to an empty string, and then it hides them. So if we press play now, we saw next race, and now we're saying next race, and it's doing a countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm counting faster than the timer. And the reason that restarted was because we've got 5 minutes in here. I said I was only going to show the seconds. So if we put 0 seconds, we start at 10 and we're going to go all the way down to 1. It'll go all the way down to 0 actually, and then it'll just stop. There we go, it's now gone. But what if you want it to keep going continuously until some sort of event happens? So let's take a look at how to do that. We'll come back into our countdown manager. Let's look at our script that's calling the countdown, and we're just calling start countdown. Now the problem with this is if you have any code that you want to execute after you've started the countdown, that's not going to work. So the first thing I want to do is give us a function that's going to allow us to call start countdown and allow code to continue to execute after that. So go into the countdown manager, and at the bottom of the script, I'm going to create a start countdown async function. And in here, I'm going to create a new coroutine. So essentially what a coroutine is doing is allowing you to continue executing some code while some other code executes in the background. So I've got this game manager coroutine, and I can execute that just by calling the game manager coroutine function. And now I'm going to go back to my script. Instead of calling start countdown, I'm going to call start countdown async. Now if I press play, we're not going to really see a difference. The countdown happens, it'll go down to 0, and it's going to stop. But what we have managed to achieve is having the rest of this script executing if we need it. So let's go back to our countdown manager, and we now want to enable the ability for us to continuously run this countdown until we choose to stop it for some reason. So to allow us to do that, I'm going to create a new property called restart countdown. I'm going to set that to true. So by default, it'll continue to execute, rather this function will continue to execute. And then after we've sent the message out to all the clients, we're going to say if restart countdown is true, then we're going to set the property to restart countdown false. We're going to make the script wait for 1 second, and then we're going to call the same function. So this is our countdown manager start countdown function. We're in the countdown function, we call start countdown function, which means it's just going to call itself and execute this again. So if we run that again a second time, not a second time, I've lost track of how many times I've run it now. We're going to go down to 0, it's going to wait for a second, and then we're going to go back up to 10. And here we are. Now, because of what we've done, we've come down here, we've set it to false. It means it's not going to run an additional time. If I come back to here, the countdown's finished and it's all gone. But you could use some other logic to help you decide if you want to continue running this countdown down continuously, or when you want to stop. You can call the stop functionality on the timer. But with this script, what we've got here, there's maybe a problem which we haven't seen just yet. And we can see this problem if we create a test server, and we'll start off with 2 players. And now when you see this, you'll see the time which the script actually starts kicking in. So we can see we're down at 3, 2, I don't know why this opens up. But we started and was down at 3 seconds left. So you don't want your script executing before the players have actually joined and can actually see what's going to be happening. So to fix this, we need to look at this script, and you can see that as soon as the server starts up, this script is going to get executed. We don't really want that to happen, so let's get rid of that. And we could think about how we could do this. We could call the players service and there's a player added event, but equally, as soon as the player's added, that script gets run, which will start our countdown manager. And then it'd get called again next time a player gets added. We only want this script to fire once. So to do this, I'm going to go to our local script. So this is an inbuilt function by Roblox, and it's a function that only turns to true once the client has finished loading the game for the first time. So with this in place, then what we can do is use our countdown remote event. And this time we're going to call fire server, which means we're going to send a message back up to the server. And we're sending the loaded message. So in our script, we need to get a reference to the replicated storage. And then we also need to call the countdown manager and require that. Now we've got our replicated storage. We can connect the countdown remote event on server event. And this is going to give us our player and our event name. So if we look back here, we're passing in the event name, but whenever you call fire server, it also passes the player from that client as the first parameter. So we get the player and the event. Now we're not going to use the player, but what we're going to say is if event name is loaded, then we're going to call countdown manager start countdown async. Now this time when we start, we should be able to get to see all the values starting with 10. So nothing's loaded yet. And there we go. We've got 10, 9. I'd love to know why these keep coming out. And that's everything you need to know to make a countdown in Roblox. You can use this on the client, you can use it on the server. It could be, you've seen it in many games, and I'm sure you'll make really good use of it. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.